Hi, Misha here, and this is kind of a two-part video. And in the first one I published, I talked about the Ichi M6A float plane, torpedo dive bomber. Not really a dive bomber, I guess, but bomber at any rate, of the Japanese Imperial Navy. And now it's time to talk about the submarine it was designed specifically to work with. The I-400 type. The largest submarine of World War II, and frankly the largest submarine for the next decade until the 1950s. And it is gargantuan. Not just because it was an aircraft carrier, but that definitely had a large role. This model here is a 1/350 scale die-cast from Atlas Editions. And just for fun, I brought out a little one that I've had longer. This is a 1/700 scale from Easy Models. I kind of got this to match the size and scale of my battleship Yamato. But yeah, this is much more interesting. It doubled the size. And a very difficult model to get. But very impressive. Well, let's just get into it. The concept for the I-400 dates to Pearl Harbor. Right after that successful attack, Admiral Yamamoto knew that Japan needed a way to take the attack to America and to just generally threaten the American homeland, and that Japan didn't have the ability. So he conceived of a fleet of aircraft carrying submarines. He set one of his captains to basically look into a feasibility study, which was given to him in January of 1942. He approved of it, and then in March of 42, the plan was kind of finalized. And then in June, the official go-ahead was given to make a fleet of 18 of these submarines. And the idea originally was to carry 2 bomber aircraft capable of carrying an 800 kilogram torpedo or equivalent bomb load, and capable of either going to and fro a target in the Pacific 3 times, or traveling around the world at least 1 time on provided fuel. So range and the ability to carry attack aircraft. Now, Japanese submarines had aircraft on board for scout, reconnaissance, surveillance, communications purposes for quite some time, but they would usually carry 1, and it would be lightly armed or not armed at all. These would be planes capable of delivering an offensive punch and flying from a submarine with very extraordinary range. To that end, it had to be a very big ship. Now, in 1943, a few things happened. First, I-400 was laid down in January, and I-401 laid down in April. But also, at the same time, unfortunately for the Japanese, Admiral Yamamoto was killed. His Betty aircraft was intercepted and shot down by American fighters. Yet this program would live on. In one way, it was improved. They found a way to get 3 of the new aircraft inside the hangar bay. But in another, it was very soon scaled back from 18 to 9 submarines. In September and October, 2 more would be laid down. I-403 first, and then I-402 just a short time later. And the 5th one to be laid down would happen in February of 1944. But because of the changing nature of the war for Japan and fewer resources, the plan was soon scaled back to 5 aircraft carrying submarines. And so there we have it. And the first one, I-400, would enter service in 1944 and would begin to train and be made ready. So what do we have here? Well, we have a massive submarine. It's just shy of 400 feet long, and it's nearly 40 feet wide. It had a crew of anywhere from 140 to greater than 150. It had the 3 attack aircraft and a watertight hangar on top, a cylindrical tube kind of on the top here. It was 11 feet wide and 102 feet long. As I said in the plane video, to get the planes inside the hangar, the floats were not installed until they were out on the ramp, and then also the wings and tail were folded up. To get the planes out, there was a big pressure door. It was sealed with a big 2-inch piece of rubber. It could be opened automatically or manually. And then when they were out front, they would be launched through a 26-foot catapult track, steam catapult. Let's see here on this model, we have a Seiron kind of preparing to go. And there was a folding crane that could pick them up off the ocean if they returned. And to get this to work, because of how much weight this whole system put on the top of the submarine, and also one reason it's so wide, it's actually a double hull, it's been described as a figure 8, but it's basically 2 submarine hulls joined together, making kind of 2 pontoons themselves inside the ship. So there's the 2 hulls below and then the 1 hangar bay hull on top. And because of where the hangar bay was, it meant the conning tower and all that had to be offset to the side. Now, while the aircraft activity was definitely the primary goal, it wasn't the only one. It had quite a large deck gun, 5.5 inches, capable of shooting out past 9 miles. It also had 3 triple mount 25mm anti-aircraft batteries, plus a solitary 25mm gun, for a total of 10. In addition to that, it had 8 torpedo tubes in the front and the bow, none in the stern. They were in 2 sets of 4. It had an aerial radar. It had a radar warning system. And they made efforts. They tried to do what they could to demagnetize the hull to protect against mines, and they put on kind of a special secret coating to try to deflect sonar. It's said that this coating was based on German technology, more inspired by it, and some sources claim it was effective. Other sources say not really. Who knows? She did have a large crew, and since she was meant to go around the world, obviously there had to be enough food and fuel on board for months upon months of travel. Unfortunately, it did not have air conditioning, and it did not have flush toilets, so living accommodations were a little bit sketchy. She was capable of achieving about 21 to 22 miles per hour top speed, maximum speed on the surface, but her submerged speed was pretty slow. It was only about 7.5 miles per hour. Also, while she was 400 feet long, her test depth was less than 350 feet, meaning she was actually longer than she could dive. And because of her size and weight, being at about 6,500 tons, it took her a full minute to dive. In some ways, it's a very impressive boat, but in other ways, it kind of sucked at being a submarine. The offset conning tower made steering difficult. It had undersized rudders. Its maneuverability was pretty lackluster. And just because of how large it was pretty easy to spot when it was on the surface and easy to detect when it was submerged. And let's not forget 3 aircraft, each carrying 800 kilograms. It's not exactly the most massive attack force. Nevertheless, throughout 1944, plans for both the sub and the aircraft proceeded. And then in January of 1945, training began. And originally Yamamoto, before his passing, had envisioned attacking American cities: Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York. But by 1945, this was not realistic or even meaningful. It was decided to attack the Panama Canal, the locks, to disrupt supplies and ships moving between the two oceans. While early on in the war, America had defended the Panama Canal quite vigorously, by 1944, the defenses had been weakened quite a bit. So some of the engineers who worked on the canal originally had been Japanese, and also some POWs provided intelligence, willingly or otherwise, and so Japan decided to go after them. And then in April, a decision was taken in private to make the Seiron attack, the M6A attack, a one-way trip, a kamikaze. Something that the pilots weren't aware of for a couple of months, but when they found out, were not terribly happy. And then in June of 1945, training began. They made a wooden mock-up of the Panama Canal locks and put it out in the ocean, practicing launching and retrieving the aircraft as well as bombing them. They found that it took about 30 minutes to launch all 3 aircraft if they fitted the floats, but if they didn't fit the floats, it would take about 15 minutes. And originally, before the kamikaze notion was hit upon, the idea was to have the planes take off, attack at dawn, drop their ordnance, ditch the planes, the crew would bail out, and the submarines would retrieve them. Then they would go back to port, pick up more planes, and go for their next assignment. Of course, when the kamikaze thing happened, it was decided just to fit them with fixed bomb racks and let them fly into the locks. So right as this was about to get underway, Okinawa fell. And it was decided to protect the home islands to attack the American carrier force that was amassing at Ulithi Atoll. It was 15 carriers, plus plenty of destroyers, cruisers, and even some battleships. So it was decided to take the two functional in-service submarines, I-400 and I-401, each loaded with 3 Sairons. In addition, there would be 2 more, the I-13 and the I-14, which were Type AM command staff subs, but they had been converted, still under construction, to house 2 Sairons. So there would be 4 submarines with a total of 10 bombers. They thought about doing torpedo bombing, but they couldn't get the hang of it in such a short time, so they decided just to fit them with conventional bombs. And so the fleet was set up. The 2 smaller subs would get their Sairons at the beginning of July, but they were going to rendezvous. I-13 was spotted and then destroyed on July 16, meaning there's only 3 vessels left. They set out for their mission. The only other I-400 class to be completed was done on July 24th. That was I-402. But before she was completed, she'd actually been converted into a resupply or a tanker. She never had her hangar deck fitted. So there was only 2 fully completed versions, I-403 and I-404, while construction had begun, were never started. Never finished. So the fleet took off. By the way, the Japanese referred to these as special type submarines or special type submarine attack force. They were to rendezvous on the night of August 14th. Get ready, and then launch their fighters, bombers, against the amassing American fleet on August 17th. But then on August 16th, they were given an order. They were told that Japan was, they didn't use the word surrender, but surrendering. And the ships were ordered to turn around and head back home. Their commander, who was on board this ship, I-401, was not pleased about this order and actually ended up shooting himself. He did not commit seppuku, but he did shoot himself. On August 22nd, the subs were ordered to destroy all their weapons, so they dumped all their torpedoes, dismounted their guns, and they tossed their Seiron planes into the ocean. I-400 just kind of rolled them off the deck into the ocean. I-401, in a little more dramatic fashion, put them on the steam catapult with the wings still folded and launched them. A couple of days later, an American, I believe it was a destroyer, would take the surrender of I-401, and then it would be taken back to Japan for all the surrender stuff. And from there, America, they would capture about 24 Japanese subs. And they would look at them all, study them all a bit. Most of them, there wasn't much there to look at, so they would scuttle them. But they would take 3 or 4 back to Hawaii, including both I-400 and I-401. They would even take I-402. And they would continue to study them for about 6 months. And then on June 4th of 1946, both of these carrier subs were torpedoed and sent to the bottom of the ocean. The reason this happened, the Russians were making noise and talking about sending inspectors out to get their own cut of the technology that they thought they deserved. In Europe you can say Russia fought the war and deserved the spoils of the Nazis, and that's right. But in the Pacific, Russia actually refused to declare war on Japan until the summer of 1945. And the reason they did that was so they could try to get in on the peace negotiations and they wanted to partition Japan up just as they had done with Germany. But that didn't work so well for them. So they went to the bottom of the ocean. They were just sent on their first mission when it happened. They also had a mission planned for September 22nd. That was what was to be the second mission after the first. They'd rearmed. Called Cherry Blossoms at Night. They were going to load the Saurons up with biological warfare bombs. Pestilences they had been unfortunately working on in China for a long time, testing on innocent civilians. And they were going to drop these on San Francisco. So luckily that didn't happen. So from an engineering standpoint, it was a very impressive submarine. But from a technological standpoint, it wasn't anything terribly new. The German Type 21 was much more advanced, and that's why the Type 21 influenced an entire generation of submarines in the 1950s. The Type 400 is a bit of the curiosity. Some have said it's kind of based on the French Surcouf class undersea cruiser, or Corsair class, if you will. And I could see that because the Surcouf was the largest submarine in the world until the I-400. Also, the Surcouf did carry one aircraft and did have one big gun, two big guns. The I-400 carried 3 aircraft and had one pretty big gun. I mean, a 5.5 inch gun. Sorry guys, it's late and I'm tired. It was quite big for a submarine. Most subs had a 3 or 4 inch deck gun, so 5.5 is big. Plus we had the 10 25mm defense cannons. And we had all the radar stuff. We had 2 periscopes. Actually, in May of 1945, this vessel here, I-401, was even fitted with a German-supplied snorkel device, meaning it could stay submerged and recharge its batteries and resupply oxygen still under the water. So while as big as an American destroyer and all that good stuff, it was kind of a fool's errand in some ways. I mean, they never would have carried enough bombs unless they had a very specific pinpoint target. It never would have worked. But I've always thought the I-400 story was neat, and the fact that we have a double-hulled, twin-hulled, I guess I should say, sub is from engineering perspective very neat too. I've talked about the Atlas models in other videos. They're pretty heavy duty. The main body is not just metal like the Forces of Valors are metal, but they're hollow. These are solid. They come on little wooden plinths. They have a little bit of a cutaway. This one is neat because it has the Sauron plane. It has the hatch open, so you can, like it's being readied for launch. Has all your deck guns. The only bad thing is that this is my second one. My first one I got was, the way the packaging are, the ends can get really banged up. And each time I've gotten these, the rudders are broken off. I think what they should do is just not pack them. Just have the hole back here where you could just peg it on yourself, because there's just no good way to do it as big as these are. The weight comes down and smashes on them, and they did their best. They put them in foam, but it's just such a heavy model that I think it would be best if they just let the end user do it. Also, the Sauron is glued in place, although it doesn't take much to pop it off, but I'm going to leave mine on, but it's just a little bit of light glue. But it might be kind of neat if they gave you a couple of Seirons, maybe one folded up still. Just a thought. And they're not very much money considering how big they are. They're about $35 or even $25 on sale. I've seen at a few places. And for a cheaper one, this little easy model is pretty neat. These are only about $10. What's kind of neat, they say these are plastic models. They are, but they do have a metal pellet in them. Metal rod is kind of ballast. So they actually do have some weight. It weighs 4 or 5 ounces. And for how small it is, it has a good amount of detail. No little Seiron plane though. And as I said in the other video, this is a De Agostini Seiron, and I had quite an adventure getting it. Alrighty, folks. That's about it. I appreciate you tuning in, and if you like submarine videos, I'm trying to do as many as I can get models of. There aren't that many out there, but I really think these are neat, and they're quite good value for the money. I think so, anyway. Hope you enjoyed it, too. Any questions or comments, please do post them below. And if you could, like, share, and subscribe. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.